So tonight, I've got a bit of a heavy topic, but I do love heavy topics that are made to uplift people. So I just wanted to just put a census out there, whether someone has ever done something and walked away and been like, only Jesus can fix this situation, because I happen to do it a lot. I happen to do it probably once or twice a week, and that's why I have a really strong relationship with Jesus, because most of the time he has to swoop in and fix situations that Renee has maybe said something or done something weird. I can laugh about it now, but I used to have a friendship with the guy that allowed me to pay for my petrol. That's God as well, but amen that he allows me to pay for petrol. But the guy who's standing there, like the attendant, is that what you would call him? Yeah. Now, his name was Clark to me. His name was not Clark in real life. And I don't understand why I was calling him Clark, but basically I would fill up my car on the same day every week at the same time, 4:15 on a Thursday. You ask, why is that, Renee? Well, because if I did it any other time, I would not have money to fill my car up, because that was payday. So I would go and I would fill up. This is a couple of years ago as well. I'd go and fill up, and I would just make it my mission to ask him a real specific personal question, because this man was like there were things about his life that just did not add up. So I took it upon myself to create episodes that I then passed on to my friends who would ask about petrol guy called Clark. Yes, there's a few people that know this story, but there was about 17 episodes where I just found out just this bit of information about why he had an iPhone 4 but the latest Apple Watch. That does not compute. And I'm not a tech expert, but I know that no one has iPhone 4s anymore. We found out about that, but come ask me after why. But basically, there was one night out of all of the nights that I went that he decided to change the script that he said. I'm a stick to the script kind of person, because I will reply the same way every time. So normally he says, thanks, Renee. It's been a pleasure. It's awesome. It wasn't a pleasure, but that's okay. He would say, would you like a receipt? And I would always say, no, thanks. And I'd walk off. This time, instead of saying, would you like a receipt? He said, have a great night. And I said, no, thanks. And I left. And instead of turning around and being like, ha, 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 I meant to do that, I just walked out. I just left it, and I actually moved that week as well. So I never saw Clark again. So you won't be able to track him down, but I should go back and revisit. I'm not going to. But it's in those times where you're just like, God, I have nothing else to do in this situation, but just let it go. Just let it go, because everything else that I'm going to do could potentially be harmful to another person. But tonight I am going to talk about surrender, which is quite a heavy topic, that in our day and age, surrender equals giving up. Surrender equals smaller person. Surrender equals you have lost. Now, my God tells me that surrender is one of the most powerful things that I can do. And for me, surrender is an everyday kind of thing. But I think that it should be for all of us. So tonight, my title is Jesus is our example, ... of a surrendered life, because I didn't want to make it too long. But that's all right. So surrender for me on a day-to-day basis looks like praise and worship. It looks like praying. It looks like catching up with people. It looks like giving my time to the church, giving in. Surrender looks like just spending time with my family. It's something that is an intentional act where we choose to fix our eyes on Jesus. So no matter what we do, we can do it with a surrendered heart, because I believe that surrender brings freedom, because I've seen it happen over and over and over again, and even in my own life. So in saying that, I'm going to talk about one of my all-time favorite miracles that Jesus did, just because it is like next level, and I love that Jesus just does his thing and just lets everyone else be like, what? I'm talking about Jesus walking on water. It's well known, but also every time I read it, there's new revelations that come out of it, which is incredible. So if you're playing along at home, it's Matthew 14, verse 22 to 33. Now, a little bit of context behind this verse and this passage where I'm picking up is, to me, I see Jesus as having such spiritual strength, because the things that we see Jesus do before and during this story is actually not able to be done by any human ever, but with God's power, we can do it. And the context behind it is that Jesus has found out that his cousin and one of his greatest friends have actually passed away. And he goes to a mountain, I think it was a mountain. He goes to a mountain, he withdraws, and he spends time with God. And then he comes back down and does another famous miracle that was Jesus feeding the 5,000. Then after, you think that is big, then after he withdraws again, and he comes back down and he does this miracle. And we see him in this particular story tell the disciples, you guys, all you've got to do is go from here to there. I'm just going to be over here praying and speaking with God, and I'll meet you. That's all they had to do. I say that, but Jesus tells me to do a lot of things, and this is all I have to do, and it goes like this. But we pick up, and it says, meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble, far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came walking towards them on water. Insane. That is crazy. So basically, these disciples, they're like here to there. Some of the disciples were fishermen, like that was their job. And they are not scared of boats. I am. But they get in the boat, they go over, 3 o'clock in the morning, a storm comes, absolutely blows their plan out of the water. My first point tonight is surrender your plans. And I think so often in situations where we just are like, God, I just need this breakthrough right here. Or God, I just need to be this person. Or God, I just need to break this habit. When in reality, God is actually more interested in the person that we become while we're waiting for our breakthrough, in the patience that we take on, in the faith. Like Jono was saying, it's building our faith. We need to allow Jesus to walk straight into our plans and change any atmosphere, even if it looks impossible. Even if you're looking at your situation and wondering how Jesus is going to get there, he's just going to walk in, obviously. Easy as that, right? We need to allow Jesus to come into our plans and make a way. But he's not going to do that without us first surrendering and being like, God, here are my plans. We see it in Proverbs 16, verse 3. It says, commit your actions to the Lord and your plans will succeed. So often, I think we take that verse as like, we're going to just submit this, it's going to get approved, and it's going to happen. Look, I've had a little bit of experience, and I know that unfortunately, sometimes Renee's idea isn't quite the best idea. And I find that out myself after all the grace that has come, and we get to what I would say the end goal and be like, oh, I actually don't want this anymore, and I've changed my mind, which we all do. But a classic case is about a couple of years ago, I decided, I was like, oh, I know exactly what I wanted to do. All through high school, had no idea, and then boom, a couple of years ago, I want to be a building designer, which is awesome, which is so good. Awesome, Renee. I love that for you. And so I started studying. And I was not the best at studying because you've got to read and you've got to write and you've got to spend time doing it. And when you are studying building design, you actually have a builder as a teacher. And let me be real clear. Builders are builders, teachers are teachers. So when this man comes over to me and asks what the desk is made out of, he did not think that a desk was an appropriate answer, but it's MDF, those who were playing along. But basically, I thought, this is it. I want to, and the heart behind it was awesome. I felt like I wanted to create homes for people. I wanted to create houses that they could move into, they could have families. It sounded really great. So I obviously am not a building designer now, could have been, but it was the moment of God interrupting that. And I remember one night just being like, God, I actually don't want this anymore. Like, I know I've gotten myself into it, but I need you to get me out of it. And it was a moment of surrender where I was like, God, what do you actually want with this? I thought I needed to have this amazing career that I studied for years and years and years. When in reality, God's soft spoken word spoke directly to my heart of being like, but I now help my youth kids and people in this church find their forever home. And so it's not so much a building that they can move into, that they'll probably move out in a couple of weeks, but it's now a place where I'm like, you know what, this home means more than any house that I could ever build or design or create. So out of that, I've got a cert for in decluttering and organising, but not a diploma in building design, but that is okay. So we see that these disciples, we'll go back to the Bible now, we see that these disciples are heading off and they've discovered a storm. And it says, when the disciples saw him walking on the water, that's Jesus, they were terrified. And in their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost." But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Do not be afraid," he said. "Take courage, I am here." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." And Jesus said, "Yes, come." So Peter went over to the side of the boat and walked on water towards Jesus. Wow. I'm going to keep doing that. Wow. How many of us have prayed like, "Lord, if it's really you, send me a sign." Or, "Lord, if it's really you, I'm going to do this." And Jesus just said, "Yeah, come. Come." But what I love is that Peter didn't actually have to get out of the boat. Jesus never said, "Peter, if you get out of the boat, I'll stop the winds and the waves and then you guys will be safe, but you've got to get out of the boat first." No, Peter took it upon himself to say, "Yeah, I'll come to you. I'll get out of the boat." And I just look at that and I'm like, the faith that he has there and the hunger that he has to call out to Jesus. Like, we could have seen this miracle as Jesus walking on the water, full stop. But we saw it as he actually invited Peter to stand with him. He called him out of the boat. It was Peter's hunger that drew him near to Jesus to actually get out of the boat and take that faith literal step. So when we choose to walk towards Jesus, there's actually nothing that can stop us. And so often I think that we take the enemy as something that is powerful, when in reality, the enemy has no authority over us. The enemy has no strength over us. The only thing that they do have is the stuff that we let them. And so when we come and when we surrender, actually the enemy loses their whole power. And when we're hungry for Jesus, there's no stopping us stepping over the side of the boat because we know who we're walking towards. We know who we're going to potentially swim for. But I think with that point, and I forgot to give you my point, is surrender to the call and surrender to hunger. You don't have to step out of the boat. And tonight, don't take it as me being like, we need to surrender. You need to. It's actually a choice, which is the greatest choice that you could ever make, to step out and step into what God's got for you, because there are miracles on the other side of that boat. I can't imagine what Peter would have been feeling in that moment. We find out. And we pick up and it says, but when he saw the strong wind and waves, he was terrified and began to sink. I'm laughing because I can relate so much to just Peter seeing the winds and the waves, not the fact that he began to sink. But it says, "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out, grabbed him. And Jesus said, "You have such little faith. Why did you doubt me?" When they climbed into the boat, the wind stopped and the disciples began to worship Jesus, saying, "You really are the Son of God." I think so often when we're in this storm or when we're facing something that is unknown, it can be so easy to look at the wind and take in the waves and take in all of the things that are going on around us. When in reality, no, Jesus has just asked us to come. Jesus hasn't asked us to calculate what's going to happen if we step out or if we take too big of a step. No. Jesus has asked us to come. And in that obedience, when we say yes to step out of the boat, we actually say yes to fixing our eyes on Jesus and taking that moment to say, you know what? I'm unsure about what's going on here, but I will fix my eyes on you. And then as soon as he took his eyes off Jesus, as soon as he took in those winds and waves, it was almost like the faith started decreasing and he could no longer walk on water. Pastor Andrew preached an incredible message this morning, but he was talking about 2 Corinthians 5 verse 7, when it says we walk by faith and not by sight. Or other translations say, for we live by believing and not seeing. So often we live in a world that says we need to see things before we wholeheartedly believe in them. And I tell you what, if I was in that boat and I was seeing things before I was believing it, I wouldn't have got out of the boat. But Peter chose to believe that Jesus is good and then saw an incredible thing happen. And once I caught this image in my mind and in my story, my whole story changed. And it was almost as if it had unlocked in me something so powerful about the fact that I could control what was going on. I could actually surrender my feelings to God and my emotions to God and my thoughts and my doubts to God, because he wasn't going to be angry with them. He was probably waiting for it. He was waiting for it. And in a world that tells us to follow our heart and listen to our feelings, so often it's so much easier to do that. To get up for work and look at the wall and say, why am I doing this job? But can I tell you, church, on the days that I felt like that and still got up and still went about my day and caught up with friends or came into work and had an excellent day, it totally changed. And they're probably some of the greatest days that I've ever had versus something that could have been the worst days ever. And we actually saw such a picture of this at youth camp at the start of the year. Declan did such a great job promoting our camp. He's incredible. He's our camp coordinator. He's so good. We have incredible camps and incredible things happen to our young people on camps. But this particular camp, we had asked one of our incredible kids to speak. And when they speak, it's like next level anointed. It's insane. And you ask any kid that went to our camp and they remember this certain aspect of our camp. And basically, we had asked this youth to talk on Set the Tempo, which was the theme of our camp, which basically meant that we go into our schools and we teach them. It's not us being influenced, it's us taking a step forward to influence what God wants. And so I remember beforehand, she came to me and she was overwhelmed. And she was like, Renee, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think when a kid comes to you and says that, your heart breaks, because it's like, no, I've seen what you've prepared. And I've seen the prayers that you've prayed, and I've seen the walk that you've walked. And it's almost like as a leader, you can see the other side of the power that's going to come. And I took her aside, and I'm not the best with feelings, but we sat down together and I just said, what would you tell me if the roles were reversed? Because I knew that if she had told me, Renee, you don't have to do it, I'd be like, this girl is not able to do it. But actually, she spoke faith over it. And she said, I know that you're scared, but God's going to do an incredible thing. And she spoke faith over it. And I tell you what, church, that message was one of the most anointed messages that you've ever heard in your life. And out of this young, tiny person crying as she talks about setting the tempo, about, acknowledging feelings and then pushing through, it was the most incredible thing that happened. And it came out of a young person recognizing their feelings and recognizing the fear that comes with stepping out from God and saying, no, my God changes things. My God will be the one that I look to. And she spoke faith over that situation. And once you unlock that, church, you are unbeatable. So, in saying this, we have a job to do as a church and as Christians, and that is to lay down our life. Not in a way that looks like we never have any fun, but in the best way possible. That looks like we are untouchable. You know, my Bible says, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. That means our God is with us. Our God is for us. It says he will never leave us nor forsake us. And so when we have that on our side, we are unbreakable.